Good morning and welcome to SimWorld today, Friday, March 7th. Hey, it's my brother's birthday today, so happy birthday to my older brother. Big 34 today, so good for him. We've got plenty to get to. This is hopefully our last audio-only edition of SimWorld today. We're going to talk a little bit of Minnesota, a little bit of Louisville, but we're going to start with a continuation of what has been a very, very bad week for top basketball teams in SimWorld U. It started all the way back, we can kind of count that Sunday, March 2nd was the start of the bad week, and that's when Maryland lost. Since then, top teams that went down. Georgia Tech lost to North Carolina. That's number 11. Number 6, Virginia Tech fell to Louisville. Number 8, Mississippi State lost to Florida. Number 12, Arkansas lost to LSU. Number 9, Iowa lost to Minnesota. Number 22, New Mexico falls to St. Mary's. Number 21, Gonzaga falls to UNLV. It continued into the Tuesday was just the worst of it, but it continued into Wednesday where Princeton at number 14 lost to Houston and Davidson beat number 23 SMU. And then last night, a pair of big losses. Number 13, Maryland loses again, and then number 10 UCLA falls to Oregon. It'd be a cop-out to say that conference play breeds this type of thing. What I think this past week proved to us is there's a line. There's a delineation right now between the trusted and the untrusted, the trustworthy and the untrustworthy. And I think the top is about 7 teams right now who, and that number might be a little large, that you can truly put it on paper, trust. Duke, Alabama, Texas, Villanova, Kentucky. You can trust them. You might be able to trust Memphis. I'm not quite sure yet. And Iowa, when healthy, I think you can trust. But they're not healthy right now, and they're not going to be for the rest of the season. So we can look at this and we can say, wow, look at all these teams. If you go into the top 25 right now, of the top 15 teams, and we're just going to do a live count of it right now, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of the top 15 teams lost their last game. And that includes the entire top 5 who have not lost. So if you go from 6 to 15, you've got 8 teams who have lost their last game, including every single seed from number 8 to 14. To me, I'm not going to get bent out of shape about all of these losses, but what I think it tells us is those are the could-be contenders, right? In this middle tier, they might be good. They could string together some big wins. They could beat some good basketball teams, and they could very well win a national championship. You know, we're looking at Virginia Tech, Memphis, Mississippi State, Iowa, UCLA. That's that group, Maryland, Arkansas. Those are good basketball teams. They could win a national championship, but what they tell me is this: the favorites are about 5, maybe 6, and it depends on how you feel about Memphis, who's been playing really good as of late. But remember, Memphis had a really up-and-down non-conference slate. They lost 3 in a row to Louisville, Colorado, Washington State. They've been fantastic since December 10th, just 1 loss. That was to Princeton. They had a very up-and-down non-conference schedule, then they get into conference play and they start to dominate. So do I really trust them? I don't know. That's pretty much what it tells us. Is there's 5 teams, and the real argument the rest of the way is who do you have as your top 4 seeds? If it were to just go straight SP, you're looking at Duke, Alabama, Texas, Villanova as your top 4 number 1 seeds. Kentucky has a case there right now. I don't think their case is quite as strong, but I think it's getting stronger every single day. But that's what this past week tells us, is that I've talked about on record that I think that the line in the sand from 20 to 25 and the ones that are just on the outside, there's not a big difference between those. Let's call them 10 teams. Let's just throw a number out there. There's not a big difference, but it's just a matter of consistency versus that upper echelon. A team like Louisville, who we're going to get to, kind of best exudes that, even though they're currently ranked in the top 15 at number 15. But that middle tier, that middle conglomeration of basketball teams, which I thought was maybe from like 12 down, but it might be all the way stretching up into the top 10. Anything can happen and things can change, and this past week showed us exactly that. All right, let's move on to Louisville. The big question mark, Louisville, they've been really good. Their top wins have been fantastic. They beat Georgia Tech twice. They lost to North Carolina, but they beat Virginia Tech. They beat Kentucky early on in the season, but they've lost to a team like Minnesota, who they actually lost to twice. And the real question mark is, can you buy Louisville? Because there's a lot of things that you can sit here and say, I want to buy them. Why? Because, well, how about they go and they beat Kentucky on the road? They beat Georgia Tech on the road. They beat Virginia Tech on the road and at home. But then you can turn around and say, well, this is why I don't buy Louisville, because they lost to Minnesota twice on the road. They lost to Iowa. They lost to Kansas. They lost to Butler. They lost to North Carolina. They haven't been consistent. If you were to just take those losses from Louisville, the North Carolina one, the two Minnesota ones, the Butler, the Iowa, and the Kansas loss, that's 6 losses. And you start to look at this team as a bona fide top 7 team already. If you look at the fact that Memphis at 17-8 currently is sitting at number 7. But the reason that they haven't been, and they've kind of fluctuated until most recently to being inside or outside the top 25, is because they haven't been consistent. They really should have beaten Minnesota at least one of those 2 times. They shouldn't have lost to Auburn. They shouldn't have lost to Houston. But yet here we are. We're looking at a team that their highs have been as high as anybody, especially when they took down Kentucky on the road. I think they might have been the number 1 seed at the time in the country, number 1 team. But their lows have been low. You can't lose to Auburn at home. You can't lose to Houston at home. Especially you can't lose to Houston by 20 points at home. But Louisville has turned a corner. They've won all but 1 game since the new year, really since 30th of December when they beat Washington after they lost to Minnesota in 2 of 3 games. They have been a much better team, but the lows still exist for Louisville. They lost when they did lose to North Carolina, 74-58. What's going to matter for this team is what do we get from Pooh Lewis. Pooh Lewis has been absolutely a revelation. He's sprung onto the scene for this group in a way that I don't think many people really expected out of him as a senior. He started the year as a likely second-round pick. He is quickly becoming a guy that I would expect to go. I know in the latest ESPN mock draft, I think they had him going in the 20s. I think this could be a top 15 pick right now by the way Pooh Lewis is playing. But the consistency for this team matters. And Pooh Lewis and Kadarius Loftus are what carries this group. It's going to be a massive question mark, and I think it's still a valid question mark for this basketball team of can they actually carry this team night in and night out when it gets to hoop stereo, where you can't have a slow night. You have to be on your game for 6 straight games, and I don't know that Louisville's capable of doing that. Offensively, they are. This is a group that really jumps out of the page as being really, really talented. Top 25 in scoring, top 40 in field goal percentage and three-point percentage. Their defense is pretty good at 41st, but the challenge has been the lows just dip so low. So am I buying Louisville? I'll buy Louisville if I know Kadarius Loftus and Pooh Lewis are going to be what they've been at their best. But my money is going to be, it's a hesitant buy because I don't know that I can trust them night in and night out for 6 games to be that same group. All right, let's head to the last point, and Minnesota's ceiling. We just talked about Minnesota and the fall that they had in those, or rather winning twice against Louisville. But the question mark, what's their ceiling? We look and they go and they beat an Iowa team that's without Lamarian Sherwood. That puts them in a really great position in the Big Ten as they sit there 4-1, sitting atop the Big Ten. I think they're currently ranked number 25 in the country, yes. So this is a team that their ceiling is a Big Ten potential champion. You have to feel good about them right now in the Big Ten for a couple reasons. Illinois and Purdue are the 2 teams behind them. Now, you really wish they could have beat Purdue when they played them on February 25th, but they didn't. They lost by 7. This is going to be a big mark in the sand and a big date to circle for Minnesota is when they play Illinois, and they're going to get them twice, March 24th and April 15th, because I think it's now a 3-team race. We should say the ceiling for Minnesota is a conference championship and I think a Sweet 16. Conference championship because they don't have to deal with Iowa. I think it's a 3-team race right now in the Big Ten with Minnesota, Illinois, and Purdue. And Purdue it has to be feeling pretty good considering they have the head-to-head over Minnesota, and they've been playing some pretty good basketball ever since we swapped it over. Their one loss coming, of course, to Wisconsin in conference play, and they get a big one on Saturday against Illinois in Illinois to try to figure out, can they be a legitimate team? Can you make another jump up? I really like Minnesota. I think they are a better team than the other two. Donald DeFetti has been a fantastic piece for them. He has really struggled for three-point this season, which is surprising for him considering how good of a three-point shooter many scouts believe him to be. He's a talented free throw shooter, 81% from the free throw line. He's only making though 12% on very, very low volume for three-pointers made in the entire season, so he hasn't been exceptionally active, but he has been so great at getting into the paint. And for that reason, and that reason alone, I think is why Minnesota, who was the worst team in the Big Ten last season, having just 5 wins, is now in a position to potentially be a conference championship. That's what I think their ceiling is. Their ceiling is where Donald DeFetti takes them. And right now, I think that is a conference championship. I think that's the easiest bar to hurdle. They're one of 3 teams, and I like them even though they lost to Purdue. And I think this is a Sweet 16 type of group. They're a team that's probably going to get a 4 or 5 seed because currently at 25, if they were to win the Big Ten, I think you get up into the 16 to 22 ranking, which isn't a large leap for this team. Gets them a 5 seed, and I think they can win out in the opening weekend. And then you start running into what we talked about at the jump. We talked about at the beginning. That very weird area right now, which appears to be 10 to 30, where there's not a big breakdown in each little segment. 10 to 15, not a big difference. 15 to 20, not a big difference, and so on. Minnesota, I think, has a shot to be a Sweet 16 team, and all of that is falling on Donald DeFetti, who, like Pooh Lewis in Louisville, I think is going to be a lottery pick. Again, I know that he was a late first-round pick in that, which I think goes to show the depth of this draft class, but Donald DeFetti is carrying the Golden Gophers. Their ceiling, in my opinion, conference championship, Sweet 16 in Hoop Stereo. All right, we have a huge, huge day starting tonight, 6 p.m. in SimWorld Prep as The Last Dance, the premier prep organization in all the nation, gets rolling with The Last Dance. SimWorld Europe Queen City Kings kicks off it's not a quadruple header of basketball games that rolls into Saturday and Sunday, both starting at 10 on each day. Saturday is Showtime and Gotham 5, and then Sunday, Philadelphia Elite will await the winner in their second round matchup. We roll into Monday night as well. So 4 straight days of prep basketball, the best prep basketball league in the country, all coming down to the end here with The Last Dance. All of that will be back and broadcast on SimWorld TV. We will be back on camera on Monday here on SimWorld Today. So we appreciate your patience as we try to figure this whole thing out. But we'll be back on Monday. Looking forward to seeing you. Appreciate you tuning in here on SimWorld TV, the only place you can see the game, be the game.